Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am very pleased to welcome all of you who are joining us through our social channels and Zoom for this Africa online webinar. Today's topic is entrepreneurship and job creation in Africa, reading between the lines. I deeply apologize for our non-English speakers who probably will not understand a lot of what we are going to talk about today. Next time, we will roll out an interpretation for you. But before we jump in our topic, so please feel free to give any comments or questions about this topic on our social channels, Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, or even on Zoom. That said, I'm Aris Somda from Africa Foundation, and I'll be joined by Christian Tiono, who is also my dear colleague at Africa Foundation. Hi, Christian. How are you doing?
Hi, Aris. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Okay. So together, we are going to interview our special guest, who is Eben Kumi. And before we give him the floor, I will let Christian introduce him to you.
Thank you very much, Aris, for this opportunity. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, depending on where you are currently. We are happy to welcome all of you to this online series of Africa webinars. And like Aris said, I'm Christian Chuno, and I'm talking to you from Burkina Faso. And today we have a guest, if I may say, a very special guest, Mr. Ebenn Kumi, who will be talking to us from Accra. And Mr. Kumi has a long and outstanding experience in entrepreneurship and working with various partners. And he's actually a founding partner of Africa Foundation, and he holds a master's degree in development studies from the Graduate Institute of International Development Studies in Geneva, that you may know. And Mr. Kumi also holds an MBA in sustainable businesses from Bologna Business School in Italy. So from his academic background, you can see that he's really well versed with the topic. And talking about his professional experience, Mr. Kumi works with the SEED, which is actually a global partnership for action on sustainable development and green economy. And actually, he's working as a national focal point in Accra, in Ghana. And as part of his work, he trains and offers business development advisory services to SEED award-winning eco-inclusive small and middle enterprises. Currently, Mr. Ebenn leads the International Trade Center's ITC Green to Compete Hub in Accra, where he's actually responsible for planning, coordinating, and linking up with the ITC and Ghana Export Promotion Authority in mainly promoting sustainable trade. So, Mr. Ebenn, welcome to this webinar. You have just listened to the brief introduction about your background and what you do. I don't know if you have a few words to say before we get into the topic.
Yes, thanks a lot, Christian. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Very nice. And thanks for the introduction. Welcome, everyone. Yes, definitely. I think you've already introduced me, background. Yeah, there's not much to say except to say that I'm also quite passionate about job creation in Africa. And so, whilst working as a startup, I don't know, is it clear? Can you hear me? Should I use my headphones or it's fine?
No, it's clear.
Yeah, it's clear. It's fine.
De- Definitely. So yeah, I want to
Yeah.
say just additional thing I want to say is that I'm passionate about really about job creation and really creating decent jobs for youth and young people in Africa because I personally think that aid hasn't worked so much for us, and so the most decent way to help support our people get many people out of poverty is really on entrepreneurship. So I'm passionate about that and how it creates decent jobs. So just that's the additional thing I would like to say. And this is why I find the whole topic for today and our this webinar quite useful, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Eben, for this additional information that you've just given. And like you said, we are here this evening to talk about entrepreneurship and job creation in Africa. And as we may know, young people in Africa, they are desperate for jobs. Today, we see many people talking about entrepreneurship and job creation, but we don't usually see automatically the link between the two concepts. So could you please tell us, or in your opinion, do you think that entrepreneurship is really creating jobs in Africa?
Yeah, so in general, I guess I have to say that the regular narrative is that have more entrepreneurship because young people come out with new ideas, and these new ideas lead to formation of businesses, and these businesses create employment. And when people are employed, then their incomes increase, right? And so that means that less poverty reduction, more employment, more money in people's pockets. And then businesses also get the more profit they make, the more taxes that they pay to the government, which means that government also gets more taxes for development. So whenever you think about entrepreneurship, there are so many benefits you can already think about. And this is why it's really a buzzword now. I mean, Rwanda's president the other day said, yeah, no, innovation is really the thing. Obama, when he was president, came to Africa. He said, yes, let young people young people are the future. And so, yes, he set up even a sort of entrepreneurship initiative. In Nigeria, you have the Tommy Elumelu Foundation, which is supporting a lot of young entrepreneurs. And in many other countries, in Ghana, there are so many projects that are supporting entrepreneurship. So the narrative is there, and but just that it's not this direct. There are caveats, there are limitations, there are conditions. So entrepreneurship definitely can or could lead to job creation, economic growth, wealth, poverty reduction, etc. But there is a big can, or there are a big conditions and limitations of how to get there. And I guess that's where we want to dwell a bit more. And those are some of the caveats that I would like to talk about and get a bit more in depth on this our webinar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumi, for this relevant information that you just given. Actually, you said it for us to really say that entrepreneurship is creating jobs in Africa. There are conditions, there are ways that we should consider. And this leads me to ask you another question. Do you think that we should promote all forms of entrepreneurship in Africa? Or
Um,
do you, Yeah. Should
Please
we
go ahead.
should we promote all forms of entrepreneurship in Africa, or we should be selective when, for example, we want to talk about entrepreneurship in Africa, we want to maybe target a specific domain or a specific field? What can we
Yeah.
say about that?
Yeah, exactly. So then that question, maybe answering the full question, will now lead me to maybe sharing a bit of my presentation for you to get into details. But before I
Yeah.
share it, yes, I mean that's the some of the questions that I hope that by the end of this webinar, we all sort of will have a good idea of what to look out for, or I hope to provoke our thinking as young people in Africa, policymakers, and all of us supporting entrepreneurs to look at some of these conditions. So, if I may, let me share my screen and then discuss a bit what I have on my slides. Probably would answer some of your questions, Christian, but also will open up the topic for all our audience around the world.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I will share my screen now.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Okay, I hope you can see the screen now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely the idea really, as Christian, you were asking me, is reading between the lines of this whole entrepreneurship and job creation. Now, to be able to answer your first, the question about what entrepreneurs should we promote, etc. Let's first look at a couple of things. So, to be able to understand that, you have to think about measuring entrepreneurship and how we sort of all agree that entrepreneurship is a good thing. But in measuring it, there are key things I would like to highlight because they are very, very crucial in what we do. The first thing is really here about determinants of entrepreneurship. So, and then you have indicators. Those are the things that you can use to gauge whether, so if it was a car and you were running at top speed, you would look at the speedometer, right? To see that I'm running at 20 kilometers per hour or I'm running at 30 kilometers per hour. So that's the indicator. So that's the key performance indicator. And then we have objectives, which is the ultimate objective that every country, or in this case, let's restrict it to Africa, African countries, donors, incubators, and any other program that is trying to promote entrepreneurship. Usually, these are some of the objectives. So the objectives are really, the first one, it's mostly job creation, right? The second one is economic growth. You want to expand the GDP of the country, which means GDP is the gross domestic product, or you can say gross national product, is the output of a person of a person in a country. So generally, you find that by looking at the total GDP and finding a per capita. So how much productivity does each person? So you divide the total population, you divide the total income by the total population. Then you can say, okay, in Ghana, for instance, our GDP has been around $1,800 per annum or so. So that's the economic growth. So it's basically expansion of goods and services of the country. Then another objective, which is usually highlighted, is competitiveness. So you also want to make sure that the country is competitive. So is it Burkina? Is it Ghana? Is it Cameroon? you want the country to be competitive, as in their goods are desired in outside of let's say Cameroon, outside of South Africa, outside of Kenya, outside of Ghana, etc. So those are usually some of their objectives. Now, let's go back to the determinants. So you see my arrows moving from determinant to objective. So what determines the entrepreneurs, what will determine the entrepreneurship success are here. You have opportunities, skills, and resources. So in the country, if you had more opportunities, skills, and resources, opportunities being market conditions, skills is the training and experience of the entrepreneur, and then resources, access to capital and technology. Then, if I have a combination of these, then you are looking at my indicators. So I'm able to create a business, and that's the firm here, right? If you look at the firm, so then you have employment also as another indicator and wealth as another indicator. And then the indicators would now direct you to the entire objective. Now, if you look at here, there should always be a correlation, a positive correlation between the indicators and the objectives, right? So that's why I have this big arrow down here, which is looking backwards. Now, what it means is that for you to measure the results of entrepreneurship, you actually have to start from the ultimate objectives back here. So if I want job creation, then I'll pick certain indicators to find out whether I'm creating jobs or I'm not, right? So for instance, if you take job creation, you can determine whether the entrepreneurship is creating jobs by looking at, for instance, the survival rates at 3 and 5 years. Because we know that when enterprises start, 90% of them, within 3 years, they are dead, right? So if you are able to find out that I supported 10 SMEs, and in 3 years, we still have 8 of them operating, there is a high chance that these 8 would have more employees, right? Think about economic growth. An indicator you could use, or maybe still back on job creation, on employment. So you can use this indicator also. So startup growth rates by employment. So you can check the startup growth rate by sales. But if you're interested in job creation, then maybe the metrics to look at is by employment, so that you see that in 5 years, the company has moved from employing 3 people to 10 people, right? Then you can measure that. Think about competitiveness. You can measure, for instance, export performance. So you can measure whether 10 companies that you've supported, are 5 of them exporting or not. And you can use this to determine whether the country is becoming competitive as a result of entrepreneurship or it's not. So here, one message I want to be clear is really about how you move from how you move from indicators how you move from indicators to really objectives, or the other way around. You pick the objectives. So if Rwanda wants to create jobs, grow the economy, that's the key aim, then they can pick entrepreneurial indicators that they can measure over time and use to determine whether they are really creating jobs. If you don't do this, then you get a wishy-washy narrative of, oh yeah, we are supporting entrepreneurs, and so that means more jobs have been created. In most times, maybe these enterprises in 5 years or in 3 years have died. So that's the key thing. Now let's go to my third slide. So assuming that these 3 things, these 3 issues here are the objectives of many countries, for sure, in Africa. in trying to support entrepreneurship. Now, let's go to, let's then ask the question, is entrepreneurship in Africa leading to these objectives? Is it leading to these objectives? Right? And here, are we creating jobs? Are we growing the economy? And are we boosting competitiveness within the region as a result of entrepreneurship? Because there's a lot of subsidies, there's a lot of support, government money, taxpayers' money that donors, governments, incubators, etc., are using to support this entrepreneurship. So if we are not getting our ultimate objectives, then maybe we are not helping ourselves. Now, for you to be able to answer that and be clear about it, I wanted to, I guess it's not a yes or no answer, but there are the conditions and the caveat that I mentioned in the beginning. So let's look at some of them. The first one, let's say we want entrepreneurship to create economic growth, right? One distinction or one condition, one caveat we need to keep in mind is the differences in entrepreneurships or entrepreneurs. So you can have, as I have here, wage substitution startups. And then you can have high growth startups. Let's look at their features. Example, wage substitution. You're looking at a typical startup. So sometimes it's just hairdressing. It's just maybe a simple food, or maybe like a kiosk, a container, a shop, a provision shop, for instance. Now, some of these typical startups, they have low entry barriers. So a typical startup has low entry barrier. Everyone can enter. You have small money and you can already start selling something. That's a typical startup. And what to know here is that that company, that startup is a wage substitution. So the person doesn't have a wage, a salary. And so they are doing this to substitute that, right? Typically, they have poor productivity. They don't utilize capital quite efficiently. And that leads to the third one. They are really sort of inefficient. They are not exceptional, you know. Distinguish that and high growth startups. High growth startups usually have high entry barrier. Think about tech companies, for instance. Even common ones like Facebook at the beginning, not Facebook today, at the beginning when they were small, and Mark Zuckerberg started it at Harvard, you needed a lot of skill to be able to understand the coding and what they are doing. You couldn't just also start, right? So that also means that they are innovative. They are using new technologies, new skills to create new value, right? And they are also efficient. And I want to speak a little bit more about the efficiency side. So mostly, you can have companies that are existing, but the only reason we should pay attention to another startup, because before Facebook came, they were myspace.com, they were all these other social media platforms. But the efficiency side of it is that, or the innovative aspect of it is that Facebook was, you can say, was maybe 10 times better than what was existing. It made it easier to share photos, right? Think about something like a WhatsApp and Viber. It's the same, but at some point, WhatsApp became much more popular because it was quite easier to use and so on. It was very intuitive. It's the same for many, many, many technologies. So I'm trying to say the high growth enterprise or startup, they distinguish themselves by their specialness, their uniqueness, and their innovativeness. they are different from the typical startups. So for us to be able to understand well, the research and data has indicated that it's high growth startups that actually contribute immensely to economic growth, not typical startups. Because typical startups are probably dying at age 3 or even less and are not exceptional. So they are inefficient. And so they are not helping us expand the GDP of the country. So that's the first one. So whenever we think about startups, my argument here is to look at whether they are high growth or typical startups. You might ask, so how do we get to know the differences? I will answer that as we go along. But let's look at another condition, second condition. Wealth creation. So the idea is that entrepreneurship creates wealth. Wealth as in, yes, you can talk about increasing the GDP, but also wealth is not only restricted to the GDP. You have to talk about the well-being of the people. Like, so sometimes you can increase GDP and it may not trickle down to wealth. But in general, create wealth of the society. You can measure that by the GDP. But beyond GDP, you can also talk about education levels, poverty levels that have been reduced, the well-being of the country as in health indicators, etc. Now, the idea is that we tend to think that number of startups, so if we have more startups, it leads to an increase in the wealth of society. But maybe, so we tend to think that there is a causation. This one leads to that. But the data has shown that a lot of the time, the wealth of the society, so the green one, rather determines the number of startups, not the other way around. So which means it's quite tricky. It's not the wealth of the society is not a cause. It's an effect. Or, actually the other way around. Wealth of the society is not an effect. In this case, number of startups is causing this, right? But we are looking at wealth of the society. So let me set an example so that it's a bit. So in Africa or in many countries, you have more startups. But that's because the society is somehow, we have high poverty levels. Why is that? Why is it that when you have high poverty levels, you have more SMEs or more startups? It's because there are no other opportunities to start. So take a typical graduate student from Wagga, from Accra, from Nairobi. The chances that they get a job are slim. So they might consider starting their own business. But do they want to start their own business? Maybe not. Maybe they want to, even if later they have a hobby, they have a knowledge that they want to start a business with. They might not want to start just right after they've completed university. They might want to get more experience, capital, resources. Remember, I said that it's about opportunities, skills, and resources. They might want to build that before they start a business. So if you go to Germany, you have more young people working looking for jobs and working than starting their own business. Because the opportunity cost in economics, the opportunity cost of they starting their business is higher than the opportunity cost of starting their business is higher than they working for another company, right? So if they decide to work for another company, they don't lose much because there are the companies, the jobs are available. In Africa, in many poor regions, they don't have the opportunity cost really is zero. for a young graduate to start their business, because if they don't start it, there is nothing to do anyway. So in the end, that may lead to a lot more people starting businesses. But are these businesses contributing? Are these businesses contributing to growth? And are these businesses actually innovative businesses that can expand the economy? So you realize, in my equation, you realize that wealth of society determines. So in Germany, there are jobs. In USA, there are jobs. In Singapore, there are jobs. And so young people will start. So when you go there, the number of people starting businesses are few. Okay, let's go to the next item also, or next condition. Still on job creation. I was talking just about typical startup. So even if you created some jobs, we need to distinguish between self-employment and jobs for others. A lot of typical startups create jobs for themselves. So the entrepreneur gets a job. That's fine. But they are not able to create more more jobs for others. And that's a crucial thing. So you see that in Africa, a lot of startups, in my own experience, the last 4 or 5 years, a lot of startups, yes, they have jobs, they owner, then they few people. They're not in the business to expand because the business is not special, it's not very innovative. So they can't expand and create more jobs for others. So it remains a job for themselves, which there is no problem with that. But if we are looking to create jobs and solve unemployment and poverty situation in Africa, then we need to look at those that are supporting, or those that are entrepreneurs that are really creating jobs for others, not only self-employed. Another aspect is really jobs versus decent jobs. So jobs, yes, fine. You can have some jobs, temporary, part-time, wages here and there, but decent jobs pay people decent incomes. Decent jobs pay people decent incomes, and they are sustainable, and they are reliable, and these jobs can reduce poverty. So we have startups that are self-employment, wage substitution. They are not creating jobs for others. Some, they are creating jobs for others, but it's not good enough. They are creating some temporary jobs. They are not permanent jobs. So when you look at this, then you ask the question, okay, so going back a bit, I'm saying that we, number one, have to distinguish between different startups. Typical startup and high growth. Number two, we have to understand that the wealthier or the richer the country, the less number of entrepreneurs, mostly. So when we have more entrepreneurs, maybe we should check it. Maybe it's because we are not creating wealth enough to get people alternatives to find employment. And because of that, many students, many young people are pushed to start their own business. Just this week, last week, Ghana's finance minister was at a graduation. And at that graduation, he has gone to say that Ghana's public sector is full, and so young people should start business. The whole country was furious. And that's because people point to so many things that they are not, young people don't have options, they don't have resources, very difficult to start businesses and be successful. They can start, but being successful and employing others is a big issue. So now, that's the second thing. So we should be aware that if our society is growing in wealth, most likely the number of startups will come down. So when we see more people entering into entrepreneurship, it should tell us that probably we are not doing it. We are not doing so great. And then third caveat is really about self-employment and jobs for others, etc. Another one is boosting competitiveness. So here we are saying that typical startups, they produce undifferentiated products on this one. So they are identical and the products usually are the same as competitors. So here we are talking really about different countries or even internally. And unique or high growth startups, their products are really differentiated and they are unique. So that's another thing on the competitiveness side. If you want to be competitive, you want to support high growth startups with differentiated products, unique. So the question with all of this is, what should we do then? If, Eben, you're saying we shouldn't support typical startups, what should we do? Simple. Incubators like us, Africuvate, and many others like ourselves, donors from EU to the US to many places, and governments like the government of Ghana, the government of Botswana, the government of Mauritania, etc. They should stop promoting and subsidizing typical startups. Because the goals that they seek to achieve are not, they cannot achieve them with typical startups. Rather, they should identify high growth startups and support them. Then the question becomes, how do you identify them? Because the idea is that, oh, let's get a lot of the startups and then support them. And some of them will be successful and some of them may not. So maybe that's the way to go. You get more startups, support them. No, that will be a waste of money because in the end, many of them won't. So for all of us, if you took the hard job of trying to identify high growth ones and supporting them, you will be conserving your money. Think about this. If you have $10,000, you have 10 SMEs, and you have some SMEs to support. If you're able to identify 2 high growth ones, and you give them 5,000 each, they are more likely to grow and create jobs than if you supported 8 of them, and in the end, 7 of them collapsed within 3 years. So it's a bit like, at the moment, what many donors, governments are doing is that, I have mud, let me throw it onto the wall and see which one will stick. So they have money to subsidize SMEs and enterprises. So they throw the money and they see which ones would stick. I'm saying maybe it's time we revise that. And it seems like that is a bad strategy because at the moment, the youth unemployment rates in my own country here in Ghana keeps soaring. But there are so many programs supporting entrepreneurship. So it means that they are not creating enough jobs. In many other countries, I know it's the same. I was in Cameroon, I was told it's the same. I've looked at the data on Entrepreneurship Monitor, or generally some data on African Development Bank. Entrepreneurship, job creation continuing to be the biggest headache of every government. So maybe, and all these governments have huge sums of money they are pumping into supporting entrepreneurship. but we seem not to be seeing results. So my point, or what I want us to reflect on, is to stop promoting and subsidizing typical startups, common ones, and identify high growth ones. So how do we do that? And that leads me to my conclusion. Eliminate the losers. If you cannot identify those who are going to win, eliminate the losers. How do you do that? Let's do a little exercise. We are all on the continent. And so I like to challenge us. What is the capital city of Cape Verde? Don't go on your phone yet. Try to guess. I'm not there to see you wherever you are listening to us from and watching us from. What is the capital city of Cape Verde, for instance? So, and I've given you some options. Number one, A, Lilongwe. B, Layun. C, Praia. And D, Boston. Right? What is really, if I ask you, what is the capital city? Might be difficult, huh?
Yeah.
Because Cape Verde is not a very common country that we hear about.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, when I was in high school and even at the university, I was taught a method to come by this answer, even if I'm not very sure.
Mm-hmm.
And the method is eliminate the ones that you're very sure are not the answer.
Yeah.
So you might look at it and see that Boston is extreme.
Yeah.
It's you can associate, maybe you know that you can associate Boston to the US. So Boston is out. You're left with what? 3. And if your knowledge of the region is a bit better, then you might know that Lilongwe is also the capital of Malawi, right? So maybe you have heard about it or because in the news, so you know that one for sure. So you take that one also out. Now you're left with what? Layun and Praia. And you can then choose one, even if you have no clue about which one it is. Now, it's better, you are more likely to get one of the answers. Now you have 50% chance to be wrong or to be right. But when you had 4, your chances, the probability was 20%. Your chance of picking the right answer was 20. Now, the chance of picking the right answer is 50. You've increased your chances of success, right? In the end, the answer is Praia, right? But you've managed to eliminate the losers. That's what we are looking at, and that's what the whole argument comes to, that incubators, African governments, donors, anyone wanting to support entrepreneurship, to create jobs and to grow the economy, to make our economies competitive, to reduce poverty, to formalize the informal sector. They should, if they cannot identify the winners, because it's very difficult to identify the typical startup, they should rather focus on eliminating typical startups from the pool. Don't subsidize them. Rather, once you've eliminated, you have a number that there is a high chance that they might be successful. I'm not saying that means that all of them will be successful. Just as the example shows, it doesn't mean that you couldn't get it wrong, but you increase your chances of getting it right. And so I guess, Christian, that's a bit the different things that I wanted to talk about. And now I guess we can also make it a bit, I guess, if there are follow-up questions from you, then I can throw more light on some aspects and set some examples. And from my own experience as well. So, Christian, over to you.
All right. Thank you very much for this very detailed clarification. And I think I've learned a lot today because I'm not really into entrepreneurship, but when I listen to you, I can see that I have things to take home and probably to discuss with the people who are interested in entrepreneurship. Personally, I don't have any follow-up question, but I will give the floor to Aris to see if he can chip in and say a few things before we continue.
Thank you, Christian, and thank you also to Eben for this relevant presentation about our topic. So before I pick up the follow-up question, personally, I do have some questions.
Please.
Yeah. Okay. The last slide, you were talking about the losers, how we can eliminate them. And the question is that how can we support those losers after they have been eliminated? I guess, in other words, how typical startups can become high growth startups.
Interesting question from you, Aris. That may be, so the way to look at it is really, yes, the losers to winners. Why am I saying that? Because we always have limited resources. So we sort of, if we are everywhere, then we are nowhere. We may not be able to support everyone. But we might be able to tell them that, look, the solution you have, your idea that you have, is a bit too typical. So could you revise it? Could you revise it? Could you go back to the drawing board as an entrepreneur and check that what the solution that you have is a bit different? I mean, incubators are trying to do that. But in general, the reason it's tricky is that you cannot teach entrepreneurship. As how do you say, as non-traditional as that may sound, the truth is that you cannot really teach entrepreneurship because entrepreneurship doesn't have a formula. And the motivations that come from people and how people start businesses really differ. So sometimes if you are trying to people start businesses based on their passion. You can't teach passion. And so they may decide to start, I don't know, something that doesn't even make sense for all of us, but that's their passion. And they would have to grow it to a point. So the irony of trying to teach entrepreneurship, I think, for instance, I recommend one book, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, Notes on Startups from Silicon Valley. And he says, yes, it's a bit, it's the irony of entrepreneurship is that you can actually teach it. So to answer your question, in terms of supporting, we have to position ourselves to a point where the entrepreneur has learned a bit before we throw in government money. So I'm not saying that they should kill their idea or so, but because resources are limited, we cannot support at a certain stage. We have to check that you've been innovative a bit, and you've worked on your idea and you're refining it, and it's looking a bit different before we throw in. It's the same, and maybe just to simplify it, maybe what I'm saying is we should act like venture capitalists, right? So venture capitalists, before they would invest their money, because it's their hard-earned money, before they would invest it, they want to invest it, they want to support you, but you have to convince them, they have to be convinced that your solution is really unique, investable, and so on. So it's a hard call, and many people might disagree with that point, that for the losers, how can we support them? But in this scheme that I'm presenting, I'm saying that the losers can be supported maybe in the beginning by, let's say, giving them training, right? Entrepreneurship training a bit, incubating them a bit, and so on. But at that stage, we cannot put money in the business. So we can support them, we can give them training, we can help them in terms of developing their technology, we can introduce them to a lot of other resources, right? Online training, another company that is doing something similar for them to learn something, and so many other support. But when I say support in terms of financial coming from the government, then we cannot. So you see that a lot of government have a lot of programs that are doing entrepreneurship training and so on. But it might be better to reduce that and put the money rather in those that are high growth. But still, you can do some trainings in general for those that are so-called losers. Christian also has his hand.
Yes, Mr. Eben, I want to ask
A follow-up question.
a follow-up question, at the same time a more general question, because when we talk about entrepreneurship and we consider African countries, we know that we have English speaking countries and
Yes.
French speaking countries. So my question is to know, or the general trend is that people believe that in English speaking countries, young people are more interested in entrepreneurship than in French speaking countries. I know maybe you don't have much knowledge about French speaking countries, but from your experience being in Accra, in Ghana, which is an English speaking country, can you confirm that this is a trend story that has been going on, and we can definitely say that entrepreneurship is really is doing well in English speaking countries?
Yeah, interesting question. I think it's I personally think it's a bit, like if the grass is always greener at the other side, like because in English countries also, I think in Ghana people also think, oh, places like Abidjan, there is quite a good number of entrepreneurs coming up, etc. But I think Ghana, if you take Ghana, Nigeria, for instance, these English speaking countries in West Africa, Liberia, not so much, because I read a couple of reports around there. In Ghana and Nigeria, I can really say, being in the space, in the entrepreneurship space, that there is a lot of entrepreneurship activity ongoing. A lot of young people, as I mentioned, our finance minister just last week just mentioned to young people that they should start businesses, etc. People were not happy. But even before he said that, a lot more people are really starting. So you have maybe a way to gauge that. Some of the metrics I will use is that now we have a lot of accelerators and incubators in Accra. Not only in Accra, in Kumasi, the second biggest city, in Takoradi, the third biggest city, in Tamale, fourth biggest city, there are a lot of incubators spreading. 4 years ago, there wasn't a lot of incubators outside of Accra. There are a lot of also co-working spaces where people are trying to give young people tools, so internet, working space, and a low-cost access to offices to be able to do their work. So a lot of we have the impact hubs, Ghana innovation hubs, a lot of hubs actually within Accra that are supporting. And then you have a lot of other programs also. The government also is in the middle of it. This government in Ghana, for instance, has started promoting a lot of entrepreneurship. They have a training program. There's a presidential pitch program that is supporting a lot of enterprises. Even if you look at the gender aspects of it, you have a lot of other programs that are supporting female entrepreneurs, for instance, in Ghana, and girls starting businesses, etc. So I can confirm, for instance, for sure, in Ghana, for the past 4 years, there have been a tremendous increase in entrepreneurship activities. And also some successful entrepreneurs actually coming up in the system. So quite a number of good high growth entrepreneurs you can already identify in Ghana and other places. I know that Nigeria also is the same. We have a lot of innovation happening there. And maybe even Rwanda is the trailblazer in this. A lot happening there as well. But Rwanda, I guess, it's a bit of a mix, right? Sometimes it's Anglophone, Francophone. It's a bit of a mix. So the Anglophone side, yes. I also know that because I did a couple of things in Cameroon, I know that the ecosystem there. But again, in Cameroon, I think I was more at the Anglophone side, and I know that they had a like a mountain valley, that like a valley where it's a bit mirrored like a Silicon Valley, where there's a lot of innovation, young people starting businesses there as well. So, of course, we might have to do a much more in-depth studies to see whether entrepreneurship levels in Francophone Africa are less than Anglophone. But in general, I think the trend in Africa is a bit going up, whether Francophone or Anglophone. But if which one is higher, yeah, I think we might need a bit more in-depth studies to tell. But the grass is always greener at the other side. People always say, oh yeah, it's happening there and than here.
Yeah.
Aris, over to you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Christian. So I should pick up the follow-up question of our of those persons who are following us on social media. So yeah, one question is that which African countries are current top performers when it comes to entrepreneurship and job creation in Africa? Are there any lessons or best practices others could learn from? How could policymakers the right initiative?
Yeah. Okay. So lessons and experiences of what other people are doing that we might have to get experiences from. So at the moment, you have quite some good programs happening in different African countries. I mean, I already mentioned, for instance, in Nigeria, the Tony Elumelu Foundation with it. But when you, let's distinguish and say government programs, then maybe we can see more. For government programs, you can already look to Rwanda for some inspiration. Because, for instance, they've tried to reduce the time for setting up a business. So short, the number of days to set up like a business. I think you can do it by almost, I think, in 48 hours or so. This is a good condition that you can use to really set up a business and start. In terms of targeted support for enterprises in Rwanda, there are, I can't say specific programs that I know that they've improved the ease of doing business quite well. But targeted programs, I cannot see. That is identifying high growth enterprises. I cannot say for sure. Of course, like I said, that's what Tony Elumelu is doing. But the devil is always in the detail, as in whether they have in mind that they identify really the high growth and give them some more employment. Here in Ghana, there is a good sort of, how do you say, lesson. I'm sure you know about the Meltwater Entrepreneurial Program, MEST. Maybe Aris, maybe you can put in the chat, or maybe I can also put in the chat. I can put the link in the chat.
I can share on our social media channels.
Yeah. So MEST Africa is focused on incubating tech SMEs. I'm trying to get you the link. And they have been operating in Ghana, in Kenya, and in, I think, what's the West? In Nigeria also, for the past 10 years. And they've churned out, they really try to eliminate the losers, like I said, and focus a bit more on the winners. So over the period, let me see, where am I? Share. You're seeing the Zoom, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's MEST.
Okay.
But in terms of getting the link, let me put in the chat so that maybe you can share. So Meltwater, as I said, it's an Africa-wide technology entrepreneur training program. Internal, they give seed fund and an incubation, etc. That's really a great way. They incubate, they select, they eliminate the losers, the so-called losers. They get few of them, and then they give them, after you've gone through a lot of training, and they select the winners, then they give them intensive training to develop their ideas. Either it's on coding, it's usually focused on tech. That's one thing. But our own sort of approach at Afrique also, we've been working quite a lot with Seed, and Seed promotes eco-inclusive entrepreneurship across Africa. So in Kenya, in South Africa, here in Ghana, previously some programs happening in Burkina Faso, but also in Malawi and in Uganda. All these countries, for instance, Seed works there. And the Seed approach is a bit similar to what I'm mentioning about eliminating winners. So for instance, this year, we had 75 applications for the seed award, which gives an entrepreneur, for instance, a grant of, let's say, 10,000 USD to develop the idea. And out of the 75, we only pick one winner. So it's really focused on eliminating losers and finding that single gem that is really the best one too. So that's also there are some lessons learned there, or there are some lessons that you can pick from the seed approach. Maybe we can share that also with our audience.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can share that as well. Okay. So that also maybe you can share. So there are quite a number. If you go through 2017 African Development Bank's report was more focused on entrepreneurship in Africa, and there are a number of initiatives in it. Maybe just 1 second, I could also show it on the so 1 second, I pick it from my library and
yeah.
And here I can already maybe I can find a link, but I have the hard copy. For instance, this is Africa Africa Development Bank's team in 2017. It was on entrepreneurship and how do you say, industrialization in Africa. And in this report, there are a lot of positive sort of, like I said, Rwanda is doing quite well in supporting. Here in Ghana, we have quite some good ones. But in general, I think a lot of governments are not going by this approach of eliminating losers. It's rather some donor programs like the one I showed you, Meltwater Entrepreneurial Program, which is quite popular in Africa, like SEED and many others that are focusing a bit more. In general, many of the governments, they do training and sort of give some funds to enterprises without doing the hard work of finding the winners. And that's where I think we need to change a bit the mode. So there are good experiences in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Rwanda. Like I said, also the other countries are doing quite some good stuff also. So there are positive. We need more of it.
So thank you very much, Eben, for these answers. So Christian, do you have any questions?
No, Aris, for now it's okay. And yeah, I want to thank Mr. Kumi for this wonderful presentation, for the relevant answers he gave to our questions. I think those who are following us, they are taking notes, and these pieces of advice might be useful in the entrepreneurship life. So thank you very much for the great work.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Before we end it up, maybe Eben, you have a final word?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. The slide you're seeing is the references, right? So I would like you can check out these references. This article, which is really, it's a bit old, but it's an award-winning article by Scott Shane. This is why encouraging more people to become entrepreneurs is a bad public policy, and also by Ahmed Nadine, a framework for addressing and measuring entrepreneurship. Of course, the African Economic Outlook, the 2017 Economic Outlook, which the theme is on entrepreneurship and industrialization, that I was sharing. So you can go to the African Development Bank reports and find this. Has some more interesting things to check out. This, as I mentioned, for me, it's really the beginning of a conversation of trying to, trying to activate our minds around entrepreneurship and how we measure it, how we see it, how we think that it contributes to our economies. And so my final words is really, let's open up the discussion. Keep in mind, when you hear about entrepreneurship and how it's creating jobs, keep in mind different things. And if you are an entrepreneur, I'm urging you to look at your solution and answer for yourself. Is it a high growth? Is it a typical startup? If it's a typical startup, you might want to do some more thinking, some more work to make it innovative. If you're a government, you found yourself in a government institution, a government program also, consider how you're supporting entrepreneurs with taxpayers' money and try not to waste it. Make sure that you are using it to create jobs, because we need more jobs in Africa. And if you are an incubator like ourselves, Africa, we also have the same task to select and find out entrepreneurs who are serious about creating jobs and support it. So those will be my last words.
So thank you very much, Eben, for these insightful and relevant discussions. I guess everyone here now can read between the lines on our topic, which is entrepreneurship and job creation in Africa. So, and at Africa Foundation, as an incubator, we are paying a particular attention to entrepreneurship and job creation in Africa, as you highlighted during this session, and particularly for young people. So after your presentation, I can remain three actors. The first one is entrepreneurs who must understand what their business, and we have also the government who can choose to support the best business, and we have the incubators like Africa. So I learned a lot about this topic, as Christian also was telling, and I can easily talk about typical startups and high growth startups. Yeah. So thank you again, Eben, for your time, for your availability to share this insightful discussion. I would also like to thank Christian for his time, for his availability to co-animate, and yeah, this was very interesting, and I'm grateful to you, Christian.
Thank you, Aris. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, and big thanks to all of you who have joined us and participated through your questions or comments. So you can still watch this event on our social channels on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So I will be enjoyed and to talk about another topic on the next webinar, and waiting for this maybe another date or another let's say another rendezvous. So I will say that take care of you, and talk to you very soon. Goodbye.
Thanks a lot, Aris. Goodbye.
Thank you, Aris.